I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
Columbia, the command module, was a supreme achievement of the technology of its age. It was the most intricate and sophisticated machine ever made by man.
These are the first astronauts to die in an accident directly related to the space program.
3 Apollo astronauts were trapped and killed by a flash fire that swept their moonship early tonight during a launch pad test. Virgil, Gus Grissom, Edward White, Roger Chaffee.
It should not be a cause for our turning back or having any question of faltering in our progress forward toward the landing on the moon.
These 3 astronauts were aboard their spaceship 10 minutes from a simulated liftoff at Cape Kennedy when the fire hit at about 6:30 tonight. They were inside their spaceship, pressurized, buttoned up inside their spacesuits when the fire hit. Closed-circuit television camera was relaying pictures of the astronauts lying on their backs inside the spacecraft atop the 2-stage Saturn I. There was a flash, and that was it, according to a NASA spokesman watching the television screen in the blockhouse a few hundred yards away from Launch Pad 34.
Top space agency officials are flying to Cape Kennedy tonight to begin the official investigation into what caused the flash fire that killed the nation's first 3 Apollo astronauts earlier tonight. All died in moments, helplessly trapped inside their spacecraft.
No single space project in this period will be more impressive to mankind, and none will be so difficult.
The launch vehicle has gone to internal power. The launch vehicle is now on its own battery power.
I was sitting at that console right there when Grissom, Chaffee, and White were killed. I listened to them die.
That evening, January 27th, a Friday, somebody said there had been an accident.
It was checklisted, double-checked, electronically monitored, computerized, televised, dehumanized of human error.
In the late 1960s, as the Cold War cast its long shadow over the globe, the United States embarked on one of the most ambitious and daring ventures in human history: the quest to land a man on the moon.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Oh, that looks beautiful, Neil. It has a sudden beauty all its own. It's like...
Gus Grissom, born in 1926 in Mitchell, Indiana, was a figure emblematic of the early American space effort. A decorated Air Force veteran and a pioneer of the Mercury and Gemini missions, Grissom's journey to Apollo 1 was marked by his unwavering determination and his contributions to spaceflight.
I realize that this isn't a flight to the moon, but if it were, which 2 men would go down to the surface of the moon?
It would be me and somebody else.
Ed White, the first American to walk in space, brought a sense of boundless possibility to the Apollo program. Born in 1930 in San Antonio, Texas, White's background as a West Point graduate and his achievements in the Gemini 4 mission epitomized the spirit of exploration that the Apollo program aspired to embody. His spacewalk, an image of human triumph against the backdrop of the cosmos, remains one of the program's most enduring legacies. Roger Chaffee, the youngest of the trio, was poised at the threshold of his first space flight. Born in 1935 in Grand Rapids, Michigan, His career was distinguished by a sharp intellect and a profound commitment to exploration. An aeronautical engineer and a naval officer, Chaffee represented the promise of the next generation of astronauts, eager to push the boundaries of human achievement. Apollo 1 was planned as the first manned mission of the Apollo Lunar Landing Program, scheduled for launch in February 1967. The mission's primary objectives were to test the Apollo Command and Service Module in Earth orbit, laying the groundwork for the subsequent lunar missions that would eventually fulfill President Kennedy's bold directive to land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth before the decade's end. This crucial first step was designed to validate the structural integrity, operational reliability, and compatibility of the spacecraft systems during a real spaceflight environment. The mission was slated to orbit Earth, testing various components of the spacecraft, including its communication, propulsion, and life support systems. The successful completion of these objectives was essential for ensuring that the Apollo spacecraft would be capable of sustaining human life for the duration of the lunar journey and landing operations. The rehearsal event, a plugs-out test conducted on January 27, 1967, was a critical component of the mission's preparation. Named for its procedure of plugging out, or disconnecting the spacecraft from all external power sources and support equipment, the test aimed to mimic the conditions the spacecraft would experience immediately after launch. This test was designed to simulate launch conditions as closely as possible without the rocket actually leaving the ground. The setup of this rehearsal was intricate, requiring the spacecraft to be fully integrated with its Saturn launch vehicle on the launch pad. The test was to proceed through the entire pre-launch sequence, culminating in a simulated countdown close to the moment of ignition. This meticulous procedure was crucial for identifying any potential issues that could jeopardize the mission's success, allowing for corrections to be made before the actual launch. It's a typical Friday in Cape Kennedy, Florida.
I'm working in the systems right now, getting up to speed, and I think we'll all be looking forward to the flight.
The Apollo 1 crew wraps up an exhaustive week with a comprehensive test of the command module.
There's always a possibility that you can have a catastrophic failure. Of course, this can happen on any flight. It can happen on the last one as well as the first one. So you just plan as best you can to take care of all of these eventualities. You go fly.
Needless to say, I'm extremely excited about being named to this flight crew, and I think I've got a couple of the greatest men in the world to work with. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Their task: to simulate the conditions of space within the confines of the capsule, with the mission's launch date fast approaching. As the day shifts from morning to afternoon, they ascend the launch tower, stepping into the capsule perched atop the awaiting rocket. This phase of testing, deemed non-hazardous due to the absence of fuel, involves sealing the hatch and introducing pure oxygen into the spacecraft, mirroring the actual spaceflight environment.
This is Pat Lead on Block 3. Don, we're getting ready to pick up on a town here. Are you ready, Dottie? You have to believe that.
The test commences with ground control and the Apollo 1 team meticulously working through a lengthy checklist.
This is ECS. Go ahead, ECS. The hatch door is secured. Roger. Baler bar down and locked. Check. Neck ring locked. Check. Tie down front and back.
25, EDS 1 pad A closed.
EDS 1 pad A is already closed.
Roger, you do not have a launch vehicle guidance light at this time?
Light, I don't have the rate light.
Negative, launch vehicle guidance. Roger.
Communication glitches lead to delays and mounting frustration.
Okay, Gus, you're pretty garbled.
Hey, how are we gonna get the moon? We can't talk between three buildings. I can't hear a thing you're saying. Right.
Suddenly, a voltage spike triggers a catastrophe within the capsule's electrical system. Fragmented communications hint at a fire engulfing the capsule.
Hey! Oh, got a fire in the cockpit!
Attempts by ground control to reach the astronauts prove futile. Calls are made to the launch pad crew.
Confirm it. Pad leader, get in there and help them.
Only 17 seconds pass from the initial alarm to a haunting silence.
Best, did you read it? Pad leader, can you get a lot of this?
The situation is dire. The fire didn't merely ignite, it detonated with such intensity that it tore open the spacecraft's hull. The ferocity of the flames escalated temperatures to 1200 degrees, causing aluminum to melt into puddles. This catastrophic event highlighted the severe consequences of the capsule's design vulnerabilities. An electrical short was the fire's catalyst, fueled by the oxygen-rich atmosphere and contained by a hatch designed to seal the void of space, tragically trapping the inferno inside. This oversight by NASA effectively placed the trio in a ticking time bomb.
This is a CBS News special report.
This is Mike Wallace at the CBS Newsroom in New York. America's first 3 Apollo astronauts were trapped and killed by a flash fire that swept their moonship early tonight during a launch pad test at Cape Kennedy in Florida.
Subsequent investigations highlight a flawed design, prone to fire risks due to flammable materials in an oxygen-saturated environment.
Within a few hours, an official investigation was underway. Tapes containing telemetry records were impounded. Photographs showing the position of every switch and valve inside the cabin were made. Eyewitnesses were asked to tell their story while it was fresh, and then shortly before 2 o'clock this morning, bodies of Grissom, White, and Chaffee were removed and brought down.
Just weeks from their scheduled journey to space, the first Apollo astronauts were solemnly laid to rest.
With the moon visible overhead and a blue sky traced with clouds, the same moon he had hoped someday to land on, the stage is set for the burial of Virgil Gus Grissom here at Arlington National Cemetery this morning.
President Johnson said in a statement, 3 valiant young men have given their lives in the nation's service. We mourn this great loss and our hearts go out to their families. Because of the tragedy, the Apollo 1 flight has now been postponed indefinitely.
In a ceremony marked by military honors, fellow astronauts mourned the loss of their comrades. President Lyndon Johnson offers condolences to Grissom's family, then faces a pivotal decision: the future of the Apollo program. As Kennedy's vice president, Johnson had championed the space mission from its inception.
Here is a bulletin from CBS News. From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago.
Following Kennedy's assassination, Johnson's presidency maintained unwavering support for NASA's ambitions. The subsequent investigation unearthed critical issues and oversights within NASA's design and operational procedures, leading to profound changes in the space program. The tragedy, resulting from a combination of a highly flammable environment, questionable engineering decisions, and inadequate safety protocols, became a catalyst for a comprehensive overhaul of NASA's spacecraft design philosophy and safety culture. The investigative panel, convened immediately after the incident, pinpointed the cause of the fire to an electrical spark. This spark, in the 100% oxygen atmosphere used during the ground test, ignited a catastrophic blaze that engulfed the command module in seconds. The oxygen-rich environment, while simplifying certain engineering challenges by eliminating the need for a two-gas system, significantly increased the risk of fire, a risk that was tragically realized. One of the most critical findings was the extensive use of flammable materials within the command module. Items such as nylon netting, foam padding, and even the astronauts' flight suits were highly combustible in the pure oxygen atmosphere. The command module's interior was packed with such materials, which contributed to the rapid spread of the fire once it had ignited. The design of the hatch also came under severe scrutiny. The Apollo 1 hatch was designed to open inward and required multiple steps to unlock and remove, a process that could take several minutes under ideal conditions. In the event of the fire, this design effectively trapped the astronauts inside, as the hatch could not be opened quickly in an emergency. This tragic design flaw was the result of a harrowing incident during the Mercury program, where the hatch of Gus Grissom's spacecraft, Liberty Bell 7, prematurely opened after splashdown, leading to the craft flooding.
To recap briefly, we have had a second successful launching of an American astronaut. Obviously not as successful as the first one because the capsule itself was lost in the recovery operation, but successful in its most important and critical area. The astronaut himself, Air Force Captain Virgil Grissom, was recovered.
The capsule had been equipped for the first time with a hatch that could be opened from the inside. Now, the controversy was over whether or not he had panicked and decided, I've got to get out of this thing, and hit the button, causing this catastrophe, or whether he had blundered and it inadvertently somehow hit the thing, either of which would be a cardinal sin.
This incident influenced the initial Apollo hatch design to be more complex and, unfortunately, more difficult to open quickly in an emergency. The investigation also criticized NASA's preparedness for emergencies. At the time of the fire, there were no adequate fire suppression systems inside the capsule, and the ground crew was not equipped or trained to deal with such a rapid and intense fire. The command module's design did not account for the possibility of an internal fire during ground tests, a grave oversight that cost the lives of 3 astronauts. In response to these findings, NASA undertook significant changes to enhance the safety of future missions. The use of flammable materials in spacecraft construction was drastically abandoned in favor of a mixed gas environment. which significantly reduced the risk of fire. This change was accompanied quickly in case of an emergency. This design change was a direct response to the lessons learned from the Apollo 1 tragedy. Furthermore, NASA's approach to safety and emergency preparedness.
Good evening. Tonight, we are on the eve of the resumption of this country's push to the moon. A push halted by that disaster on Pad 34 almost 2 years ago. The entire Apollo program has been re-examined. The spacecraft redesigned, with the work done, the attempt to reach the moon, and to get there before the Russians, resumes tomorrow morning with the launch of Apollo 7.
Tell me, what do you think about the space program?
Well, I'm a little excited.
Reaching the moon and returning safely